Today, on this episode of The Crossover, we will be discussing race, genetics, and cancer with world renowned scientist and professor at the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, Dr. Sophia George. Learn why Black women with breast and ovarian cancers have inferior outcomes when compared to women of other racial groups, and how doctors are working to craft superior strategies aimed to fix this. Much more on this episode of The Crossover. Good afternoon, everyone. Going to be talking with rock star Dr. Sophia George today, going over some of her groundbreaking research on race and cancer. Hey, Sophia, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Well, all the way from across the ocean. How's everything?
Whew, everything's fine. It's been a busy trip, but everything's good. How are
Well,
you?
listen, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much, for having the time to join us today. I'm going to do a brief introduction just while everyone's logging on, but we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Sophia George, who is a friend and colleague here at Sylvester. She's a world-renowned researcher and cancer expert. Sophia is currently an associate professor of gynecological oncology and director of the diversity, equity, and inclusion at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. Of note, she was recently awarded the prestigious Chan Zuckerberg Award for her groundbreaking research focused on the pathogenesis, genetics, and epigenetics of breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancers. Her pioneering work has been funded by the NIH and Department of Defense, and she's been featured in the Miami Herald and Forbes magazine as well. Just a little background to her research. Black women with breast and ovarian cancers have inferior outcomes when compared to women of other racial groups, and her research aims to figure out exactly why that is occurring. She is currently part of a multi-disciplinary team that studies the incidence of these mutations in Afro-Caribbean nationals. She is also a co-leader of the Women's Cancer Working Group in the African Caribbean Cancer Consortium and co-principal investigator of the Transatlantic Gynecological Cancer Consortium. Her hope is that by better understanding the biology of cancer in Black women, that we can craft superior strategies to prevent cancer, detect them early, and then optimize treatment. So very excited to speak to you today, Dr. George, about your topic of understanding race, genetics, and cancer and how they all tie together. Welcome, and again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's start with just some background for people who may not know enough about this topic. But, um, cancer does not discriminate, and it really affects everyone, but it doesn't affect everyone equally. Discuss what got you into this research and what did you notice when you first looked at the epigenetics?
So I would say first, my PhD was in molecular genetics, and I studied in stem cell biology. And it was a family member who told me about her friend, a young lady, 34 years old, who was diagnosed with an aggressive breast cancer. And at the time, I was in a postdoc studying hereditary ovarian cancer. Um, so we know that women of Ashkenazi descent, 1 in 40 people of Ashkenazi ancestry, have a mutation in the BRCA1 or BRCA2 genes, but we didn't know much about any other population. And at the time, coincidentally, there was a study that was initiated in the Bahamas by faculty members, Julie Hurley at University of Miami. And so this is how I got involved. I felt that I could use my skill sets to start asking questions about people from my community, and more broadly now people in the United States, and my community here means the Caribbean, and now more broadly even internationally.
So this is not a problem that is localized just to this country. This is a global dilemma in terms of race and cancer, correct?
Correct. And so one of the things that have been noticed or observations is that when people of African ancestry generally develop aggressive hybrid diseases, and that's independent of the site of origin. So breast cancers, ovarian cancers, endometrial cancers, um, lung cancers. There is just a plethora of these aggressive diseases that occur in people of African ancestry. And so I focus clearly on women's cancers, but it's not unique to the United States.
So let's talk about your particular focus. Why do you believe that Black women with breast and ovarian cancer have inferior outcomes compared to women of other racial groups?
So every year, the American Cancer Society releases a report on the overall survival and survival rates of people of different races based in the US. And we see time and time again that women of, well, people of African ancestry, but Black women in particular, have worse outcomes. They disproportionately develop triple negative breast cancer, which is a very aggressive breast cancer, and also disproportionately develop high grade endometrial cancers. And so the data is there. Why that is the case is the reason that I'm doing this work. We think that there are contributions to structural racism and how that might be playing a role, or how that is playing a role in the types of cancers that develop in these populations. We also, of course, think about the bones, right? The ancestry, the DNA, how that contributes to cancer and increased risk. So one of the studies that we did a few years ago is that we looked at women. We're in Miami, and so Miami is a very immigrant-rich environment, and we have a lot of Black women who come from the Caribbean. And we noticed that women who were Haitian had really bad outcomes with their breast cancers. And so we looked at an epigenetic study that's in this case compared immigrants versus people who are born and raised here. And we see that there are differences in the tumor signatures. And so that's some of the work that we do in the laboratory. We're still trying to figure out what does that mean in the context of response to treatments and initiation of the disease. But that is in the context of epigenetics.
So, I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of variables that are playing a role here.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that inferior outcome that you're seeing do you think is due to biology versus confounding social issues, potentially? People who may have less financial resources, discovering the cancer later, treatment is not ideal, versus strictly biology?
So we actually think now that most of what we are seeing is likely due to social rather than biology. So work that we have done looking at the germline genetics, so meaning predisposition to breast and ovarian cancer, we see that the rates vary across different populations, and I can talk about that a bit more. But when we look at factors like, as you said, access to care, so being diagnosed at an advanced stage, that means there are just limited tools that the physician has to be able to treat your disease, right? And of course, the presenting or going to the doctor when you have these symptoms and the cancer is diagnosed at an advanced stage, we think, well, one, did you not have the resources to go to the doctor, or is it that you didn't perceive that you should go to the doctor, that you had the resources but you didn't go, right? And then, of course, there is sadly, not everyone is treated equally. Right. And so you have people who do present and don't get the optimal treatment. And that's still an issue that we're working towards, that everybody be treated equally when they're presenting with a disease. And then, of course, there is the biology, which we think is maybe 15% of the contributor to worse outcomes, we think, right? But we have to keep doing the research for us to be able to definitively say.
So let's talk about that biology, which you just mentioned, right? What exactly are the biological differences that you've discovered between Black women and women of other races?
Right. So I mentioned earlier that women of Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry have we thought, high prevalence of these mutations that increase risk for breast and ovarian cancer in these genes called BRCA1 and BRCA2. And so because we saw a lot of Black women were diagnosed with breast cancer at an early age, we thought, well, let's go, in particular women from the Caribbean, being in Miami, let's go look and see how common are these mutations. And what we found was really surprising in that in the Bahamas, for example, 1 in 4 women who were diagnosed with breast or ovarian cancer had this mutation. In the Ashkenazi Jewish population, it's 12%, wow. Right? So almost double. And when we looked in other islands, Trinidad and Tobago, so it was 12% in Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados 17%. Dominica went from, I think it was 77% or 78%, Haiti a bit lower, 6%, Jamaica 6%. So we had this varying amount of, I would say, genetic predisposition to breast and ovarian cancer. But what that means, though, is that we have to get a heightened awareness. We, meaning the biomedical workforce, that when a woman who comes into your clinic, or even awareness in the public, that when you, based on where are you from, what is your family history, those are some tools that we've now hopefully given to the community, both the medical community and the community at large. And that's why, I'm talking to you about this, so that we're aware of our risk. And then, of course, the physicians, when they see a woman in their clinic, say, hey, like, what's your family history? Where are you from? And hopefully have the conversation about breast and ovarian cancer risk in that context.
Now, so again, you just mentioned doctors utilizing this to kind of, level the playing field, improve those inferior outcomes so that African American women are on par with women of other races. Are there any specific applications of the information that you're gaining that doctors can use in women with these types of cancers?
Yes, so one of the things that we have already available are for women who have breast and ovarian cancer are targeted therapies like PARP inhibitors. So individuals who have a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation have been shown to have superior response to these targeted therapies. So that's one thing. And so what that means is when a woman, Black or white, or any race actually, comes to your clinic, you should, for ovarian cancer, it's standard of care to have everyone be tested for the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes and other genes. But we also know that this is not happening, right? So that doing best care medicine, performing best care medicine is going to improve everyone's outcome. So yes, and of course, if you identify women who have these mutations, that it means that the family members ought to be roped in too, so that we can prevent their cancers from happening, because they're tools to prevent breast and ovarian cancers in the context of chemo prevention, and then of course surgical prevention, and having conversations with their primary care or their gynecologist to monitor so that we can identify cancers early or prevent them.
Now, you mentioned earlier all the confounding societal issues that play a role in these inferior outcomes. In many respects, these are actually harder to address than the biological issues, which is kind of crazy. But what do you think society needs to be doing to address these confounding variables that lead to inferior outcomes for these women?
So, of course, one of the things I guess I can say might be controversial is universal health care, right? So, so a woman doesn't have to think, I can't afford to go to the doctor if that is the reason why she's not going. And then secondly, is for us to keep having conversations like what we're having now, awareness. And implicit bias is real, right? So we have perceptions that certain individuals or groups of individuals, maybe from historical perspectives, don't participate in clinical trials, or don't participate in, or don't adhere to medications or treatments, that we should be more open and thinking that we should communicate and offer to the patients the same things that you'd offer to anybody, no matter their race. And then also, there is a colleague of ours who thinks about the social aspect of medicine. Do the women need a bus pass to be able to come and go to the clinic? And that is, of course, a low hanging fruit, right? So how do we, as a health system, provide or think about partnering with other entities to provide those resources so that individuals can come to their appointments when the cost of the treatment is not the issue, but the social need is.
Yeah, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head when you said about raising awareness. I think that most people don't understand that cancer, although it does not discriminate, it's not an even playing field. And I think everyone kind of needs to do their part in terms of raising awareness so that we do even that playing field. I just wanted to talk about your prestigious Chan Zuckerberg Award that you won for your project entitled African Caribbean Single Cell Network. Tell us a little bit about the aims of this project.
Yes, so first I would just say one of the things about this is that the Chan Zuckerberg has funded or continues to support the Human Cell Atlas. And that means that it's a project where we're trying to sequence every cell in the human body. And so what they identified after 3 years of doing this project, that there were individuals who were not represented. And usually those were individuals, actually, so 95% of the data set were of people of European ancestry. And my work, of course, as I've already said, is that I think about breast and ovarian cancer. And so our proposal was to say, well, let us also sequence women of African ancestry, the breast tissue, the fallopian tube epithelium, and then referring over prostate, because those were cells in which gave rise to these high-grade aggressive diseases. So what is the normal across the entire spectrum of us human beings, including people of African ancestry? So the main goal is to map these cells in these different tissues. And then secondly, we are going to be looking at the germline, the genotype. So are there any aspects of our genome that's relating to certain cells within the tissues? Are there more stem cells, for example, different types of cells that may give us an indication of the cell's potential to develop cancer? And then finally, we have a community outreach component. And that community outreach component means that I and my colleagues get to talk about participating in biomedical research in the context of our communities, because we do need more individuals from every ancestral group, from every race, to participate so that we understand what's happening in our bodies. And the study is across 6 sites. It's in Nigeria, Kenya, Bahamas, Haiti, Jamaica, and Miami.
I mean, that's amazing. What other major cancer centers are involved besides Sylvester's? Is it led by Sylvester? Is there anyone else who's involved that we need to know about?
So I am the lead PI. So it's being led by Sylvester, and of course I have a colleague at Fox Chase Cancer Center. She is a cancer epidemiologist. Her name is Camilla Reagan, and she is leading the community outreach and engagement components. And then everyone else is in the Caribbean or Africa, Kenya and Nigeria. And of course, these are, I can name the institutions. So University of the West Indies in the Bahamas, and also in Jamaica. In Haiti, it's IHI, which is Innovating Health. And in Nigeria, it is the University of, it's a long name, but it's in Bauchi. I know. And then I'm just being honest. It's in Bauchi and the University of Calabar. And my collaborator here is Professor Bala Odu. He's actually now the Vice Chancellor of another institution. So we're getting the opportunity to expand the study sites here. And then in Kenya is the University of Nairobi.
Now you're currently in Nigeria?
Yes, I am currently in Nigeria.
And tell us a little bit about how long you're there for, what parts of the project do you supervise while you're there? How often do you have to go there?
So yeah, how often is a good question. So I got here last week, Sunday. So I'll be here for 2 weeks. The first week today's Friday. So this week I visited some of the study sites where we did a site initiation visit and trained my collaborators and their teams on how to process the samples, how to enter the data into RedCap, train them, talk again about the study, why it's important, and get feedback from them. And if like what we plan to do is not, in terms of the standard operating procedures, is not ideal for their specific setting at their particular institution. And so a lot of the sites are in the north and in the northeast of Nigeria, and then we have one site in the south. And so that's what I'm doing tomorrow. So I'm currently in Abuja. Abuja is the capital of Nigeria, and it's in the geographic center of the country. And tomorrow I'll be going to Calabar, which is in the south. And then next week, I will be with my colleague Matthew Stromberg, who is a Oncology at Sylvester. We are launching with the International Gynecologic Cancer Society and the Postgraduate Committee of Nigeria, the Gynecologic Oncology Fellowship. So when we first, so one of the things that we established, entities we established, the Transatlantic Gynecologic Cancer Consortium in 2019 with Professor Bala Audu. We, in talking about not just having a unidirectional relationship, but a bidirectional relationship, one of the things that he indicated is that they would like to set up a Gynecology fellowship because there's no formal Gynecology training program in Nigeria. And of course, coming from Sylvester, University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine, and already having a fellowship that is directed at the University of the West Indies in the Bahamas with and Dr. Matthew Stromberg is the director there. We started having these conversations with the International Society on how we can, in the future, develop with our Nigerian colleagues, counterparts, a program. And I don't know if it's because of COVID, right? But during COVID, we did a lot of talking and a lot of planning. And so we're really happy that we get to launch the fellowship next week, Monday. We'll be giving lots of talks, a lot of conversations, a lot of presentations, selections of the fellows. And the plan is that the fellows, again, bidirectional relationships. The fellows will have mentors in Nigeria, of course, mentors at the University of Miami. I'll be a research mentor, so research is important component, and that hopefully they'll be engaging in research that's reflective of their needs in their country.
I mean, it's such groundbreaking work, and again, congratulations on finally getting it off the ground and your award and everything. Give us a little perspective. What do you think are the future implications on cancer care of the work that you're currently doing?
So there may be more than three, but three main things that I think about is prevention, treatment, and then survivorship. Survivorship, we have a large survivorship program at Sylvester that's headed by Frank Pinedo and also Matthew Stromberg. Carmen Kalfa is part of the medical team that's part of the group. And so I will reserve the space for them to talk about that, but that's important, right? So prevention, understanding the genetic risk, how common these mutations in the general population, how can we identify these women and families who are at high risk? How do we ensure that we provide the best care, preventative care for them in both resource-rich in the US and relatively resource-limited environments. And then, of course, treatments, right? So we see differences in response to standard of care therapy. Is it due to what's happening in the tumors? Is it due to maybe some underlying differences in our biology, like, for example, neutropenias that some people of African ancestry have? And so therefore, when they start getting the chemotherapy, they have to take more breaks, and then those breaks allow the tumors to become unresponsive to standard of care treatment. And of course, that happened because not many Black people, at least in the US, participated in clinical trials, both for not being included, approached, and also because at the time, and still now, but we're working more towards this, and COVID allowed us to see how we can do more outreach to engage folks to participate in clinical trials, but the mistrust, right? So how do we understand more of the tumors, what's happening, and improve, and also the person, and improve, I guess, protocols to improve their outcomes in that context. So those are the three things.
It has such widespread implications. And I guess along those lines, the next question is, will the results of your work be applicable to other forms of cancer?
So yes, in the context of germline genetics. So it's not just breast and ovarian cancer, it's families, right? So we know for those, at least the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes that are very common, when I say common, meaning that those are the genes that are linked to hereditary cancers, prostate cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, melanoma to a lesser extent. And that is independent of sex, right? So, so both men and women have those organs, and therefore working with our colleagues and getting more of this data to understand the prevalence of these mutations is important beyond breast and ovarian cancer.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about your crystal ball view, just because I know that you're super busy and I kind of want to, you know, respect your time. Give us, as a cancer researcher, as someone who's doing groundbreaking research, what do you see happening in the next 5, 10, 20 years in terms of major breakthrough discoveries in cancer?
So one of the things that I really would like to see evolve and get better and even be disseminated more widely is precision medicine. So how do we use liquid biopsies, for example, to better detect cancer, and or maybe even detect it early, detect it when it's recurrent? How do we use this precision medicine to prevent disease, again, in family members and within individuals, right? So, and then of course, finally, targeted therapy. How do we have better algorithms to target the treatments to individuals rather than giving everybody the same general chemotherapy? And now we have better targeted therapies like PARP inhibitors and so on, and even immunotherapy. But even within those, we know that there are people who respond and people who do not respond. So how do we get better at that? And that's where I think, and then of course, the cost of those treatments to be accessible so that we don't have to hear about young people, young women in particular, dying of these aggressive diseases.
I mean, so many critical topics that you touched upon. One is access to healthcare, such a controversial topic. I don't even know if there's a right answer. I think universal healthcare sounds great, and I would love to see it personally, but so many other factors that kind of play into that. And then targeted therapy, you know, that's something that I think all of cancer treatment needs to rely on. I think melanoma is a great example of how we went from having terrible treatments to having super specific treatments, and the outcomes really skyrocketed. So hopefully your work is going to lead to some of those breakthroughs. Thank you again, Sophia. Truly amazing interview. Congratulations on everything that you've accomplished, everything you're doing. I think it's hard to put into perspective the implications of your work. You know, you're working on a project that has the potential to benefit hundreds of millions of women, and that's just absolutely amazing. So again, congratulations, safe travels, and again, thanks for all your work. Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say that, you know, it's a team effort. It's a big team effort for all of the stuff that I have talked about. I've been very grateful for my mentors, but my team, my lab members, the fellows, the residents, actually the team at Sylvester for supporting the work that we're doing and encouraging this work to be done. So yeah, it's stuff that I'm passionate about, and I get to do what I actually dreamt about doing when I started my career in biomedical research. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that passion shows, and you're obviously a role model for so many young scientists out there who want to achieve great things. So again, you know, congratulations and safe travels.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Bye.